Hey everybody, Christopher Greene, AMTV, Alternative Media Television. It is April 22nd, 2020. Hindsight is 2020, and they put all of this in plain sight for all of you to see. But again, many have eyes that are open but do not see. They are blind. Many have ears to listen, but they cannot hear, and they don't understand. They truly don't see what is coming. You know, I've been prepping for years, for over a decade now. It's one of the reasons why I've planned with long-term food storage, and I planned for a financial collapse in U.S. stock markets. I planned for a lockdown. It's why I pretty much lived my life the way that I currently have over the last 10, going on 12 years now. What if I were to tell you that this is just phase one? Phase one of the critical infrastructure collapse, all planned. All planned. Now that they've got all of you in your home, now that you can't leave, now that your children aren't going back to school, now that they have a prolonged blackout and a prolonged state of what some are calling soft martial law, all of these new restrictions, these health and medical restrictions, that this was just phase one of the critical infrastructure collapse, and you've seen nothing yet. Nothing yet. You know, it might be hard for some of you to believe what's coming could be any worse than what we're currently experiencing. Please take a moment. Please share this video. Get it out to your friends and family. This truly is an information war to get the truth out to the American people and those of you tuning in around the world. So people are not only prepped, they know what's coming. Okay? They know what is ahead of them. This would sound, and probably still does, sounds like fantasy or conspiracy to some of you. And that would be the case. I would actually agree with you if this wasn't true. The U.S. Defense Department, the Department of Defense, the DOD, and the Pentagon laid out in this report in 2018, which I broke down for our entire audience at the time. I did about an hour special on this. I may, in fact, re-release it sometime in the future, called the Electromagnetic Defense Task Force. It is a printable PDF. I'll put a link in the description. You can still read about it. And it covers various topics in the electromagnetic spectrum, and also covers what our top generals, like this guy right here, view as the greatest threat, not just to America, but every country worldwide. An EMP, an electromagnetic pulse. Now, they also cover various aspects of the electromagnetic spectrum, including 5G. Again, this was years ago. This was in 2018. Even before that, we were talking about this, a brand new military wavelength and a millimeter wavelength that your government here in the United States admits and confirms is a military weapon. This is the reason for Donald Trump's launch of the Space Force. It is the reason we are currently at war with other nations like China. Notice that fizzled out because there was never a negotiation with China, because there's not going to be a negotiation and there's not going to be peace. Notice we had huge propaganda coming out of North Korea via the mainstream media in recent days, putting out propaganda. It's all that it was. Kim Jong-un was allegedly injured and that he might have had some brain trauma due to a cardiovascular event. None of that was true. It might be based on some truth, but they're just rolling that out Sun Tzu style, as in the art of war, as they prep for the greater conflict. Again, this quarantine and lockdown is just phase one of a critical planned infrastructure collapse in the United States and worldwide. Whether or not this is banking, and it is the reset of the financial and economic system, a move away from the petrodollar and the formation of new currencies that are digital, which China just announced, and the United States has been announcing with Mark Zuckerberg's Libra coin, which will be the preferred US dollar equivalent in the future. This is why they're working with central banks and they're trying to organize Libra around this new model, so that you can't buy or sell without the approval of your government and leadership. This is the reason for the surveillance state. This is the reason for social credit scores that have been rolled out in China and now are being rolled out in the Western United States. And these are the documents from our 5-star generals. And this is all in the public sphere. People ask me, Christopher, how did you predict all this stuff? Not that I get everything right. There's certain things I get wrong. But how did you know that these things and these events would take place in advance? Well, it's not that I have really any insider information. They tell you. They bold-faced tell you what they're planning on and what comes next. So what does come next? What if I told you that they were planning for a total blackout here in the United States of America? That the US, China, and its enemies are currently fighting a space war with laser weapons and satellites and new technology, black ops stuff that you've never heard of, that will dictate who is the supreme world sovereign leader in the future as they integrate us into a global new order and a global government and a global infrastructure and a global dollar. I'm going to review with you 4 key technologies that some of you might be aware of, but many of you probably aren't. Kinetic physical weapons. These are satellites that are vulnerable to objects that can be launched into space and they almost act like ballistic missiles. It's a satellite that can be placed in orbit and intentionally maneuvered into another satellite's path, includes ground stations, and can be attacked by conventional military weapons or disrupted through an attack on the power grid. Now, the principal risks that Major David Stuckenberg, James Woolsey, Colonel Douglas DeMaio here, and many other top officials within the United States government have been planning for and warning Americans about. That's why FEMA recommended 6 months food and water about a year and a half ago. Now we know why, because this is just phase 1 of the quarantine. And then phase 2, in my opinion, will be a total blackout. I don't know where that blackout will be. I don't know if it's in limited capacities in various parts of the world. I don't know who will be responsible for the blackout. But I do know that Donald Trump and all of our top 5-star generals are preparing for an electromagnetic pulse to bring down the grid that they warned themselves, the Department of Defense, the Pentagon, and the DoD said would decapitate our nation to a grinding halt and could have some 90+% of the human global population perish, according to them. So we have kinetic physical weapons. Again, this is all in the electromagnetic spectrum. They call this EMS as the acronym. You have non-kinetic physical weapons, which includes lasers. Ronald Reagan talked about this before his time. High-powered microwaves, electronic magnetic pulse weapons. Now, you need to understand that North Korea, even a small little nation with very little technology, a closed system that is North Korea with their own military propaganda and mainstream propaganda, has the ability now to launch these types of weapons very easily. They can do it from a truck, they could do it from a train, they can do it from a boat. To send these kinetic physical weapons or non-kinetic physical weapons or lasers into our atmosphere, into the ionosphere, I believe it is, if I remember this report correctly, that I read a long time ago, that would decapitate the entire grid in any targeted location that they choose. Now, keep in mind, this is why Trump has been concerned with North Korea. He's been trying to negotiate. And it's why North Korea poses a serious threat to the United States, because it is a proxy for China. Now, North Korea would never act on something like that, an EMP bringing down the electrical grid and the electrical system, unless it was approved by the Chinese government and Chinese premier. This is not difficult to do. And if you do spend the time to read these hundreds and hundreds of pages, I've read thousands and thousands of pages. There's actually an update. This is the 2018 model, but there's a 2019 electronic magnetic defense task force that you can read about. This all ties in what's going on now. Starlink, right? What have we been talking about recently? A giant deception that's going to come to the American public. Okay, there's been many people talking about this. Starlink is a 40,000 plus network. This is just one company. All these tech companies are doing this, launching out into our atmosphere, which tie directly into the DoD, the Defense Department, and this agenda right here. These are military weapons. 5G is a military weapon according to our own DoD. Okay, that's not my opinion. And this infrastructure being launched is not so that they can give you faster internet. This is a Sputnik moment, like we had the space race with Russia. And look at what happened with that, right? We had the threat of nuclear war. We had the threat of fallout. Okay, many of you baby boomers remember having to get underneath your desk at school because a nuke was about to go off, fired off from Cuba or the USSR at any moment, before its collapse. Then we had the war on terror, the war on radical Muslim extremists, and like I've talked about in recent days, the next giant deception, which I believe will be rolled out very, very soon. Again, we are just in phase one. Now that they've got you locked in your home, you're in a quarantine, they've changed the game, they're resetting the monetary system. Notice Bank of America just put a new price target on gold of $3,000 an ounce. Kinetic physical weapons, non-kinetic physical weapons, electromagnetic pulse weapons like a nuclear detonation in space that can have physical effects on satellites and ground stations without making physical contact with them. Lasers can also be used to temporarily dazzle or permanently blind mission control, critical sensors on satellites, while high-powered microwave weapons best deployed from another high-flying platform, which can be launched by North Korea or any rogue nation, or God forbid, a terrorist group or something like that, can disrupt or permanently damage a satellite's electronics. Now, of course, all nations are working on this, whether or not it is Russia, the United States, or China. Now, what's been concerning to U.S. intelligence in recent years is China has actually been winning the 5G war, which is why they're rolling this out very aggressively now. The invisible enemy, the alien virus. I mean, look at all the things that we're fighting against right now. Also, this includes cyber attacks, possible intrusion points for that, antennas on satellites and ground stations, landlines that connect to ground stations, to terrestrial networks and the users of terminals that connect to satellites. I've also talked about this for years. If you look at the Civil War, one of the reasons historians argue that the North and Abraham Lincoln won the war is he controlled the supply lines. He had the railroad infrastructure. Now, what is the modern digital infrastructure and railroad? It is the internet, and who's in control of that? I think all of you know. That's why DARPA actually created the internet. Got the crazy little hair sticking out here. DARPA created the internet as a part of a black ops deep state program, okay, and so it could operate in a state of war, almost like a different type of Morse code. It is also why they've taken something that was supposed to be decentralized, where anybody could use, where there's the free flow of information, and they have monopolized it, curtailed it, censored it, taken it over so it's only controlled by a few entities. Because at the end of the day, just like 5G, the internet is a weapon of control, propaganda, and war, which is why just a handful of companies have been allowed to monopolize the entire space, because they don't want you thinking for yourself. And they don't even want you to look up publicly available information like this. This has been confirmed by so many sources and so many people. This just came out a couple days ago saying, new warning, it's from the Washington Examiner, COVID-19 is nothing compared to the phase 2 EMP threat, electromagnetic pulse. That COVID-19, imagine for a minute how off guard, no matter what you think about COVID-19 and the alien virus, the invisible enemy, no matter what you think about that, think about how caught off guard Americans have been. If they've been caught off guard, or maybe you tuning in have been caught off guard because you weren't awake and you couldn't see with your own eyes, to the point now where you've had to rush and stockpile food and water and medicine and supplies and all these things, and now you're thinking differently about living in big cities because, again, you're realizing it's not safe in big cities, and you need land, and you need sustainable lifestyle, and you need gardening skills, and you need to grow your own food, and you need access to water, and that population truly is your greatest enemy, and dense populations are the biggest risk. If you were caught off guard with that, and I'm preaching to the choir here, many of you are preppers tuning in, imagine how caught off guard people will be as Trump moves to protect the nation from electromagnetic pulse and electromagnetic attack, according to Forbes. Now, Donald Trump has been working on this ever since he came into the presidency with the announcement of the Space Force, that new technology, and working with 5G and within the electromagnetic spectrum phenomenon. This is an article. I'll put articles in the box below. For those of you that don't know what an EMP is, a pulse that would just basically take down the entire grid. There's a great book called 1 Second After, I believe, by a gentleman, I think I remember the author's name, John Matherson. It is a terrifying book with an opening from Newt Gingrich, where he actually encouraged all of U.S. congressmen and women to read it, and everyone in Washington, D.C. to read it. There's also been critical reports released that I've reported here on AMTV, where they are prepping for the removal and prompt evacuation of the president and our officials if things get worse as a result of the invisible enemy in Washington, D.C., and they would be moving them into a underground scenario, of course, which we have shadow government in place, and we have various infrastructure and nuclear hardened bases. Some you know about, others that you don't, that include places like Cheyenne Mountain. So you need to understand that this is the new war that Donald Trump is fighting. That everything that is happening now is happening for a reason. Make no mistake about it. It isn't an error. It's not like they didn't plan this. It's not like they hadn't run every scenario and moved the necessary chess pieces in advance to control populations, to control media, and now with physical control, keeping all of you in your home and refusing many of you tuning in, work, employment, income, and in some cases even food, as we see the National Guard rolling out across different states as they start to think about reopening things in limited capacity before many of these entities say that they have either a vaccine or everybody has been tested. The point of this video is that what you're experiencing now is just phase one of a greater rollout, of a total blackout about to hit somewhere in the world. I don't know who will be responsible. I don't know in what limited capacity or grand capacity that this could hit. But as a student of history and a student of our actual intelligence coming from documents like the Department of Defense, and you can read this for yourself if you have the time, I do know that this is what's next. This could happen, and this is just my opinion, this could happen in a limited capacity, maybe for 24 or 48 hours or something, just so that they could harness more control, right? Just so a government could blame another government. Notice how the Chinese government says everything the American government is saying right now is propaganda, and that it's actually the United States responsible for the invisible enemy. And notice how we see the war of words with Donald Trump and the Chinese premier. So important that you guys are prepared. It's so important that you share this video. Please do that. Also, I encourage you, learn as much as you can. Read this document, download it, pull these other articles, and share it across social media. I love you guys so much. I'm Christopher Greene. You know, sometimes I get a lot of criticism, which I don't care about, to be honest. I wouldn't make these videos if I cared about being criticized. You know, usually I'm in advance of a lot of these events actually transpiring. But I hear things sometimes like people say, Christopher, have you ever heard about the boy that cried wolf? Yeah, I have. I'm not sure if you read the story. He warned the people over and over that the wolf was coming. He said the wolf was coming. Maybe you've read the story in the Bible about Noah warning the people that he was going to build an ark and that you needed to seek refuge before the flood. People denied him. They laughed and they mocked. And the boy, he continued to warn about the wolf. The wolf was coming. He said the wolf was coming. And you know what happened at the end of the story? The wolf showed up and the flood came. So I don't care about the timing. I don't care about being right about that. All I care about is getting the truth out to you so that you can make critical decisions now, long in advance, before the crisis hits, before this transition, which has been pre-planned and engineered for a very long time, to destroy the modern sovereignty of the United States, move all infrastructure to a global platform, which is what is happening now, to control mass populations using fear and invisible enemies and alien viruses and grid down scenarios while they stockpile your government does. Critical infrastructure and supplies like masks that they said don't buy, and now they're making it mandatory to go into a store, or food storage, or even a report came out the other day which suggested Bill Gates has been buying long-term food storage and bunkers for years. Another stories that I've been warning you about for over a decade, because all of these people are prepared except for the American people. And all of these people know what's coming, just like I know what's coming, because again, they're not hiding it. It's out in plain sight. This is what's next. This is the infrastructure they're worried about. These are our five-star generals. And this is what they have to say about a total grid-down scenario in the United States of America, of which the wolf shows up. Hey guys, Christopher Greene, AMTVgold.com. Click the link below and take advantage of our gold and silver offering. We have 10, 20 ounce, 100 ounce gold stackable bars proprietary to AMTVgold.com. We also have 100 gram gold bars and more, also government minted coins, the ones that we still have left in stock. What we have happening worldwide, folks, is not just a game-changing event, but there is no going back to the way that America used to be, with $2 trillion in stimulus and more bailouts, and Donald Trump now asking for an additional $2 trillion in public works programs. The more he nationalizes the banks, the airlines, and other very large industries in America, only assures the downfall and eventual inflation, if not hyperinflation, of the US dollar currency in most of your pockets. It is so important that you take at least a portion of your net worth, in my opinion, some 5 to 10%, and buy gold and silver while it lasts. Again, 3 to 5 weeks shipping delivery time. Again, we are seeing the same thing happen in gold and silver that we saw in food just a couple of months ago. So make sure you take advantage of this offer right now. Click the link below or visit us at amtvgold.com and get what we have in stock while it lasts. Again, our customer service team, you can send us an email or give us a phone call. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. Again, 3 to 5 weeks delivery, and we are working around the clock to deliver precious metals to your door. Thank you so much. God bless. I'm Christopher Greene, and that's amtvgold.com.